live stream at www.boston.gov/citycounciltv and on Xfinity 8, RCN 82, Verizon 964. It will also be rebroadcasted at a later date. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.go@boston.gov and will be made a part of the record and available to all councilors. Since this is a working session, there will not be a public comment period. The purpose of this working session will be for councilors to review the specific language of the docket. This morning, I'm joined by my council colleagues, Councilor Lydia Edwards, Councilor Ed Flynn, Councilor Kendra Lara, Councilor Julia Mejia, and Councilor Erin Murphy. This home rule petition would declare that a state of emergency exists in the city of Boston with regards to environmental injustice and climate change. If passed, this legislation would amend the BPDA's enabling acts and remove Public Service Corporation's ability to seek an exemption to all Boston zoning laws by petitioning the State Department of Public Utilities. This legislation would instead give the building commissioner the authority to enforce environmental justice standards if the commissioner determines that a use or proposed use of a building, structure, or land in the city would negatively impact environmental rights afforded to residents by state law. The building commissioner would have the authority to issue a stop work order or suspend any issued permits, licenses, or authorizations associated with the use or proposed use. Before I turn it over to the lead sponsor, I'd like to read a letter of absence from Councilor Louis Jen into the record. Dear Chair Arroyo, I regret to inform you that I will be unable to attend the Committee on Government Operations hearing docket number 0321, a special law securing environmental justice in the city of Boston. The city of Boston must be an active participant in new environmental justice regulations coming from the state. This home rule petition would go a long way to securing low-income and Black and Brown communities the rights they deserve. Environmental justice must be taken seriously and actions taken immediately. My staff will be attending, and I will thoroughly review the video, hearing minutes, and public testimony. Should you or any member of the public have any questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to reach out to my office directly at 617-635-4376 or at RufC@boston.gov. Sincerely, Rufci Louis Jen. And with that, I'll now turn it over to the sponsor of this docket, Councilor Lydia Edwards, followed by the rest of my colleagues by order of arrival. Councilor Edwards, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Councilor Arroyo. I really appreciate the expedient and urgency and sense of urgency that you held this working session. Just again, to remind people what the goal is and why we're getting this, and just to slightly add to your summary of what this will do, Councilor Arroyo. First, we are, as residents of Massachusetts, we are given the right under our Constitution to clean air and to clean water under Article 97. This is a constitutional right that we have. Moreover, that right was recently enshrined in our legislature for the first time, using the words environmental justice and making sure that there was a standard where it included environmental justice communities, asthma rates, looking at also the language access and looking at all of these different components when it came to how we define environmental justice. That is a new law that was just passed by, and it was sponsored by my representative, Adrian Modero. This is part of that continued enshrining of environmental justice in all of our laws to make sure that all of us, all of our lungs, all of our health is actually impacted rightfully and truthfully the way that our Constitution had thought of. So this is going from the constitutional level to the state level, now to the municipal level, and putting environmental justice as part of our zoning code for the first time. So I'm very excited about that. Now, the question then is, when you put in a right, what good is it if it can be overridden or ignored? And so our current zoning allows for the utility companies to simply apply for an exemption to our rules and override them by going to the Department of Public Utilities. Essentially, they don't have to follow our zoning process. They don't have to have the same back and forth. And in part, that is to make sure that they can efficiently put in necessary infrastructure and to prevent them being blocked by NIMBYs. But what it's been used instead of is a bulldozing of the rights, concerns, and even real conversations about what that infrastructure should be. Is it sustainable? Is it healthy? And does it belong in certain locations? So what this does is simply say, we want that process. We just want it to be controlled and informed by the city of Boston. We believe that our Boston Zoning Commission has the expertise and the necessary accountability to be able to make sure that we are planning a sustainable future. We also have the Green New Deal and also have the direction of our new mayor to make sure that we are a greener city. So the first thing, as Councilor Arroyo mentioned, are putting in taking out the exemption that utility companies no longer have to come to the city of Boston about where they're going to be sited and how. But we then put in, and this is the zoning commission will promulgate regulations and come up with a way in which they will come up with a efficient, environmentally sound, and also sustainable method for utility companies to be sited in the city of Boston. So this is taking one system and replacing it with a locally controlled system. The second thing that this does is it makes sure that there's police powers and enforcement powers. And the way we enforce all of our zoning, whether it comes to the fire commissioner, whether it comes to the sanitation codes, we have the building inspector go in and make sure that the building is compliant, whether that building was built in 1907 or the building is to be built in 2027. And so this is for the first time enshrining environmental justice norms, codes, and understanding in our building code. So that if there is a polluter, or if there is a building that is not compliant, or is causing more than blight, but actual environmental injury, the building commissioner can shut it down. And that's the goal. This, of course, was sponsored and inspired by recent action in East Boston. But the fact of the matter is, we as a city of Boston need to have an infrastructure conversation. It needs to be enshrined. It needs to be regulated when it comes to environmental justice and where utility companies should go for in the future. This is part of the same conversation when we've had a comprehensive conversation when it came to the building emissions regulations and Beardo 2.0. This is part of the same conversation we had when it came to the environmental core and youth core. We are headed in towards a green future, and our zoning as well as our building regulations need to be updated to make sure that we are able to enforce that environmental green future goals. So that's all I have. I'm very excited to get into the weeds of this. I'm happy to answer any questions about the language. It's not actually very long in terms of home rules. Just to let people know, again, this is a home rule petition because our zoning is unique. It would need first to pass through the city of Boston and then be signed by the mayor, and then ultimately would go to the State House, in which the State House would have to approve and get it done as well. Thank you very much, Councilor Arroyo, for letting me go. And I'm very excited to get into the weeds of the language.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards. And I just want to know we've been joined by Councilors Michael Flaherty, Councilor Kenzie Bach, and Councilor Brian Worrell. We're going to go down and give folks a chance to do openings, and then I'll explain the second part of this process because it's a working session, and I want to try and maximize everybody's time here. So, Council President Flynn, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Councilor Edwards for that explanation. It was very helpful. I want to thank Councilor Edwards for her important work she's been doing on environmental justice issues. Also want to acknowledge the strong work Councilor Lara is also doing on environmental justice issues as well. This is an important issue to me. I'm also looking at areas in my district, especially Chinatown has the highest asthma rate of any neighborhood practically in New England. So I want to work closely with my colleagues to address environmental issues and justice issues that are impacting my constituents. We're literally on top of the Mass Pike, the route from Maine to Florida 93. We're across the street from South Station with the trains running, with the airplane, with the trains running, with the buses running, the exhaust. So environmental justice is a critical issue. Again, want to say thank you to Councilor Edwards, Councilor Lara for their important work. And thank you, Councilor Arroyo.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Lara, followed by Councilor Mejia. Councilor Lara, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I am excited to be here to be a part of this conversation. I definitely don't need to be convinced about my support for this home rule petition, but I'm excited to hear from Councillor Edwards around the possible application, what inspired the home rule petition. And I think that that's going to be incredibly important for us in the future. So I'm glad that this is filed. I'm here to listen today and look forward to stewarding this in collaboration with my colleagues as it moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lara. Councillor Mejia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the maker. You know, as someone who I always talk about the fact that I grew up in a community that has been bearing the brunt of climate change here my entire life, especially with someone who has asthma. I'm really incredibly grateful that we're leaning into this conversation. And I also think that oftentimes issues of climate change just don't reach neighborhoods like mine because we don't see how they intersect with the trauma and violence that we see out in these streets. But in so many ways, they are interconnected. And I think that this home rule petition is an opportunity to bring people together on the issues of climate change in ways that we haven't seen before. So I thank the maker and I look forward to this conversation and more importantly, learning about this proposal in ways that we can steward it along and bring it to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mejia. Councillor Erin Murphy, followed by Councillor Flaherty.
Hi, good morning. I'll hold my comments for later, but thank you. I'm glad to be here. And like you said, this is a working session, so I'm looking forward to ask some questions later when we get into the weeds and are more into the topic. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Flaherty, followed by Councillor Bach. Councillor Bach.
Thank you, Councillor Arroyo, and thank you, Councillor Edwards, for introducing this. I think that, you know, whenever we're talking about environmental justice, we really need to think about like what are the procedures that bring justice about. And I think the reality is that that whole environmental justice lens has not been built into our regulatory procedures around this. And even though it was a major step, I know led by Rep. Madero, Councillor Edwards' colleague, and others to sort of embed environmental justice a little bit more in state law. The reality is that that doesn't, I think, really have the teeth or substance that it needs yet. And per usual, Councillor Edwards is thinking about how to make the rhetoric real. So I really appreciate this recommendation. I think it would make a lot of sense for the city to have this control and really this, you know, discretion and perspective built in at the local zoning level. And so I'm excited about the petition and, you know, looking forward to the working session, but fully expect to support it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Councillor Bach. Now, Councillor Worrell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Edwards for bringing this important matter to the floor. And I'm in support. I think it's needed, and making sure that, you know, it's at the local level and that it has some real teeth behind it. So just looking forward to getting into the work in this working session. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Worrell. And so we have a number of folks here today. And so I'm just going to run through the names and sort of how I foresee this playing out so that this works as a working session. We have John Waukee here, who's the Director of Waterfront and Climate Initiatives with Green Roots. Stacey Rubin, the Vice President of Environmental Justice with Conservation Law Foundation. Cindy Luby, New England Director of Clean Water Action. Dwayne Tyndall, Executive Director for Alternatives for Community and Environment. Frank O'Brien from the Allendale Coalition. For the administration, we have Jean Luck-Teixeira from the Boston Water and Sewer Commission, Project Director of Asset Management. And from the companies themselves, we have Nicole Bowden from Eversource, the Community Relations Specialist, who's also bringing along Aaron Engstrom, Craig Halstrom, and David Rosenweig. And so here's how we're going to try to do this. This is a working session, and for our guests, who this may be the first council hearing perhaps you've ever been to, a working session is when we get into the language itself of the home rule petition and or ordinance before us. Today, it's a home rule petition. For all my council colleagues, that home rule petition should be sitting in your inbox. If you open it up, it's 2 pages. It goes from section 1 all the way to section 4. And so what we will do is give our guests a chance to give a quick opening statement each, and then any edits or anything that they think or believe is crucial to this being effective and or an issue they can highlight and we will work from there. Normally, if this were a hearing, we would allow questions from all our council colleagues in order, and we would go down the whole list, and then we would do it that way. What I would like to do, for the sake of trying to run this better, is having yellow hands go up if you have a question for a panelist, or if you are a panelist and you have a question about the language after the openings, just raise your Zoom hand, and that way I'm not just running down the list asking everybody if they have questions. I will just know if you have a question. If for some reason you don't know how to do that, just raise your hand on screen, and I will see you. And so with that, I'm going to kick it over to our panelists, starting with John Waukee for a brief opening.
Thank you very much, Councillor, and thank you to all the councillors for hosting this, and thank you very much so to Lydia Edwards for proposing this. My name is John Waukee. I live in East Boston and work at Green Roots. And for the past, and prior to working at Green Roots, my identity has been the past 8 years following the formal procedures around the Eversource proposed substation in East Boston on Condor Street, and actually predates that when the initial conversations were happening before they actually filed with the Energy Facility Siting Board, attending meetings at civic associations and hearing about a land swap deal, and we were going to get a great location for a library. Knew nothing about energy policy going into this, and quickly drank from the fire hose and got up to speed on how our energy infrastructure gets invested in the Commonwealth, who makes those decisions, and who is at the table for those conversations, and realized that there are a number of failures in that process. And throughout this time period, we've been following this project and trying to influence the process. We have used all the legal mechanisms we have available to us, and they've been lacking. The system is set up in a very deferential way towards the industry to investor-owned utilities for investing in transmission and distribution. And from our perspective, this has been detrimental to the community because we haven't been able to have a very straightforward conversation with very clear data and clear justifications for why things are happening. And when we've tried to get that conversation going, there have been barriers put in place through the legal procedures that exist through the Energy Facility Siting Board. And the most latest version of that has been this certificate of public interest and environmental impact, which is basically a trump card, which says we can push aside local zoning, we can push aside state laws like Chapter 91, all of the mechanisms that we as advocates make use of quite frequently. And all of that gets brushed aside. So having this home rule petition really would put in some more checks. And some people might say, well, it was a year ago, we just passed an EJ bill, and it was a little prior to that we passed a local wetlands ordinance in the city of Boston that included some environmental justice language. Well, the reality is none of these laws really mean anything if they're not implemented. And we're a year on, and for example, there is an EJ advisory council that the governor has slow walked, and we have nobody on that council. So there's no environmental justice review of this project at this stage from that new mechanism. The local wetlands ordinance in the city of Boston, likewise, has been sort of dragging on for quite some time. We have the ordinance passed, you all did your job. The actual written regulations aren't there yet. So that your efforts are not hitting the ground yet because they have not been implemented yet. And so there really is a need for to be pushing on as many buttons, EJ buttons, as we can, and pushing forward as many mechanisms and tools at our disposal. Because when we look at things like the Energy Facility Siting Board at the state level and the state laws that enacted that entity, they were really written by advocates of the industry. They were not written by advocates of the community. They were not written by advocates of the environment. And that's essentially what we're doing here. We would like more accountability. We want more democracy. The city of Boston is really leading in that in terms of having participatory budgeting, of having new procedures for really getting people engaged in how their city and how their state is governed. And we should be promoting that wherever we can. And in this case, with the with this Eversource substation, I think it is a very good example of where if you were to poll the people, as we did in November, you find that 80% or more are saying, we don't think this is a good idea. If you talk to the elected officials, city councilors, you talk to state reps, state senator, you talk to our federal delegation, everybody is saying this is not a good idea. And so why are we coming to this point where it's still moving forward? There is this sort of procedural inertia in this process that defies common sense and logic. And I do think going forward, there's going to be a concern, and Lydia Edwards mentioned the concerns around NIMBYism. And that is a legitimate concern. Nobody, and Eversource has even said this themselves, nobody wants this in their backyard. But sometimes it's needed. And that's fine. We can accept that. The question is how much in one neighborhood's backyard is right? And at what point do you put forward the data and the information to have an honest conversation about whether something is needed or not, and do an assessment of how much of a burden is this community taking on? That parcel of land where this is going, for about 15 years in the city's own open space plans, that parcel of land was promised as a passive recreation, as green space, and then within the lifespan of this project was even proposed at one point for a soccer field. And all of that is being taken away for this infrastructure, which is supposedly needed, but we have not really seen a clear case as to why that is. And so I would just close by saying this home rule petition, this is the beginning of a long road and a long fight, because when it gets up to Beacon Hill, there's going to be, Eversource has invested a lot of money on Beacon Hill and in lobbyists, and we are going to have to fight for it there. But I think from the perspective of the city of Boston, this makes all the sense in the world to have a say on what actually happens in your neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just so I don't have to start calling out time on folks, just please try to keep the opening to just 3 minutes. I appreciate your comments. And so we'll go through each one. And if there's things that come up, hand up for questions. Next up, Stacy Rubin from the Vice President of Environmental Justice with the Conservation Law Foundation. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Councillor Edwards for her leadership on this issue, and really just want to thank all of the councillors for standing up for environmental justice in the city of Boston. Conservation Law Foundation is a nonprofit organization working throughout New England on environmental justice and other matters. We have been supporting Green Roots, the residents of East Boston and Chelsea, to oppose this facility for several years. I just want to let people know that we are challenging Eversource's request for a waterways license under the state Chapter 91 procedure. So that is an active pending appeal. And we are also actively involved in the new docket that is before the Energy Facility Siting Board, where Eversource is seeking a certificate of public interest. We will continue to challenge the location of the substation at this particular parcel of land on environmental justice, as well as numerous other environmental, public health, and other grounds. I'm happy to be here today. Really appreciate the leadership of the city of Boston in making environmental justice not just something that is on paper, but is something that means something on a daily basis. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And Frank O'Brien, I see, is on. Frank O'Brien from the Allendale Coalition.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. So as we know in the city, first preliminarily, I'm very much in favor of this home rule petition. It makes a lot of sense, and it's necessary to fill in one of the gaps in the regulatory framework that we're operating under. I think one of the key themes here is how these goals that we have for addressing climate change, for addressing environmental justice, both individual impacts from a particular project, but also the cumulative impact, the historical impacts. They haven't made their way into the regulatory framework yet, and this is one key way to do that. There is a rationale for some provision to override, which is kind of what Stacy was referring to. But if that provision is abused, if that provision doesn't take into account the local knowledge and expertise that exists, for example, in the city, then it really needs to be sort of counterbalanced. And I think that's one of the goals here that's very important. I would make two other points. The first is 100,000 plus Boston residents voted against locating the substation at this site. And the override certificate and other proceedings, right, they say there has to be a public interest showing, right? So the public interest should be determined by the public at some level. And we're hoping that the city, this is the second point, petitions to intervene, and I know that's kind of technical, but it's very easy for the city to do, for the Wu administration to do, petition to intervene in this override certificate of public interest that's being sought. The deadline is April 19th. I'd very much hope that with everything that we know that's going on, that the city officially petitions to intervene in that, while this measure wends its way through the system as well. So with that, I'll stop, but thank you all very much.
Thank you, Frank. And we've been rejoined by Councillor Michael Flaherty. If Councillor Flaherty, if you'd like to give an opening statement, I'm happy to go to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and obviously thanks to the lead sponsor for filing. And no specific questions at this time. The only thing I need answered, I just want to get a reminder for everyone as to how our zoning rules would play out in a mass DEP review on public service corporations. So that would be very helpful, I think, to me, but two, for everyone's edification. Again, how our local zoning rules would play out in a mass DEP review would be very helpful. But again, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the lead sponsor.
Thank you, Councillor Flaherty. And so the last person who is actually currently here, and we'll add in folks as they come in, is Nicole Bowden from Eversource, the community relations specialist. So Gene Luck Teixeira is not here at the moment. When he gets here, we'll signify that he is here now. But Gene Luke, is it Gene Luke Teixeira? There we go. And Nicole Bowden, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you, Counselor. I just want to thank you all, say good morning. Thanks for having me. I'm joined today with my colleagues, Erin Engstrom, David Rosenzweig, and Craig Hallstrom. Again, we want to thank you for allowing us to be here. Thank you for bringing me into the conversation, allowing me to have a seat at the table with you all. And I look forward to today's working session.
Thank you, Ms. Bowden. Here, I'm muting myself. Okay, so now everybody should have the actual home rule petition in front of them. Normally, what I ask folks to do is just tell me section or sentence that they have any kind of comments or concerns about, or that they would like to amend in any way. I'm going to kick it over to Councillor Edwards, just because it is your home rule petition. If there's anything that you wanted to change or amend. You're muted, Councillor Edwards.
Sorry, no, but would it be okay if I went through each section and explained what the goal was?
Certainly, that's fine with me. It's okay. So folks should have in front of them sections 1 through 4.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Edwards.
You can hear me.
Yep.
Right. Okay. Great. Thank you so much. So the first thing that we try to do, so section 1 is the first thing we try to do in section 1 is, and this might be the controversial thing, but I'll kick it to my colleagues, is declare formally a state of emergency with regards to environmental justice and climate change in the city of Boston. I think that I feel that it's necessary that we center this in the sense of urgency and why it's necessary that we have to get this done. But also, it's not trying to expand the huge amount of powers, but I think it also helps to justify to the State House, where hopefully this will go, that there's a state of emergency in this particular location, and the local location is trying its best to resolve that. So that's the first thing I try to do in this section. The residents of the city suffer from air and water pollution, as you know, that's something, again, part of this. And so we are trying our best to, again, center the sense of emergency, environmental injustice, and then also talk about environmental justice communities and the burden that is built on them. Again, this is all the justification that we're trying to bring to the State House to explain why we need to recapture this power. Also, we cite the Constitution. So the first section really is about why this is happening, what rights we have that allow for us to do this, and also the burdens that we're facing if we don't do this. The second section is basically going to, and I apologize for not getting you section 6. I don't know if that's possible to get section 6 where you can see the language currently as stated, but in section 6 of chapter 665, it essentially provides the ability for a utility public service company to appeal to the Department of Public Utilities to forego the zoning of the city of Boston.
If I could just interrupt right there, Councilor Edwards, we do have sections 5, 6, and 7 of the Act of 1956. So it's 4, 5, 6. If you look in your email that should have been sent out to all the councilors, if there's a second attachment there, section 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, that Councilor Edwards is referring to now, but we do have it. So it is.
Excellent.
We do have it. Thank you, Councilor Edwards. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make sure so you could see the language and what we're trying to amend. And so as we go into the working session, you might, be seeing some tweaks that I may have missed, or some areas that you specifically want to streamline. But the goal ultimately of this section and this language is to no longer allow for that foregoing of our local laws, number one. And second, it places the Boston Zoning Commission, it centers the Zoning Commission as the entity that will be governing the siting going forward, at least for public utilities, but also that they have to create regulations. We expect them to be comprehensive. I want you to know we expect them to include environmental justice, include a public participatory process, and do all of these different things. But you can't put all of that in a home rule. So that's why we give them 1 year to do all of that. And in order to come up with those regulations, it will be a back and forth that is community-led and will ultimately lead to what I feel a more just understanding of what is environmental justice meeting at the same time utility needs of the city of Boston. The goal is to get us to a yes that we can all not just tolerate, but celebrate in a sustainable way with utility companies. And I believe we could do that in 1 year. And I believe the correct entity to do that, which some of you may disagree, is the Boston Zoning Commission. I also wanted to make sure it was the Boston Zoning Commission because one, they're appointed by the mayor, and two, so we have an appointed and accountability system to our mayor. And then two, they also have their own built-in public comment period, back and forth, accountability, and amendment process as well. So that's the reason why we picked them. I do understand some people, I did get a call, concerns about the Boston Zoning Commission not having, for example, an environmental justice expert on the commission. I understand that, or that they don't have somebody in green space currently as an expert on the commission. I understand that. I'm not disagreeing. But I do think the process that will allow a table to be set for those experts to be at the table in more than one language in 1 year can get us there, get them real lived experience. Sorry to speak so long. I just want to make sure everyone understands the goals so that when we're going back and forth, you understand hopefully the goals and you can agree with them. Fine. The last section is what I think is the most robust and new. And I really am looking forward to the back and forth on what you think, of how we are going to enforce environmental justice in our Boston zoning code. That I think is the most exciting part about this. This is basically, we list the several laws from the Constitution to Chapter 91, and of course the new amendment for environmental justice, and say, well, how is this going to actually be real? Well, I mean, honestly, are we expecting, and we love you, Conservation Law Foundation, but are we seriously expecting them to sue every single time? That's not fair. right? If the government has been tasked with protecting the people of Boston under every other aspect, sanitation, traffic, blah, 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 and so on and so forth, restaurants, as we know, if it's all under that umbrella, then this should be part of that umbrella. And you should be tasked with protecting us when it comes to environmental justice as well. So what are those standards and who would enforce them? We put in, at the local level, the Boston Zoning Commission. The building code, and the building inspector. And so we're trying to have that person or that entity to be able to go in, again, with ideal regulations set by the Boston Zoning Commission about what is environmental justice, what's an injustice in the building code, and with clear guidelines to make sure that we're enforcing them. Why this is important is because we can have something cited years ago that is causing an injustice today. Also, our standards for everything else changes. Our standards for sanitation code changes. Our standards for traffic change. Everything changes all the time. And we want an entity that is equipped with the inspectors to also meet the moment in those changes and those standards as we go along. So that's why I also felt the building inspector would be able to do that. Again, this is going to be probably the meatiest part where we're going back and forth and really building something special together. I don't see opposition here. I just see great ideas coming together. So thank you, Council. Oh, and the final part of this, and I want people to understand why I did this, is I made the provisions of this ordinance severable. Of course, that's the normal severability language. And also the goal is it can be amended at the State House. I did that for genuine fear and concern of, I'm just concerned that, just the politics of it. I think it'd be easy. Some parts are going to get through, some parts are going to be opposed, it's all hell. And not saying that I don't think I can do it, but, I think John Waukee summarized what the fight will be at the State House very well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards. Now, if anyone has any questions pertaining to anything that has been said or to the document itself, please raise your Zoom hand or your actual hand, and I'll call on you in order. I see Councilor Murphy. So, Councilor Murphy, the floor is yours.
Sure. So I have a few questions for Eversource. I know you have a few representatives here, Nicole and others. So would you like me to ask one at a time? I can do one at a time. I have a few, just so I can be clear on some questions I have. My first one is, how did Eversource choose this site? And if you could, it would be helpful if you could describe similar sites around the city of Boston where substations are located in near parks or playgrounds or around water or in environmental justice neighborhoods. So that's my first question.
Absolutely. And I think we can go question by question if that's all right.
That'd be great. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think that we kind of all know the long history on this site, but Eversource had a site over on Bremen Street in East Boston that we were looking to site our facility there originally. We worked with the city that they wanted to use that site as a public library, which now stands there, very beautiful for the community to use. And in that siting and in that selling of that site to the city, we acquired this site here over in the Eagle Hill section of the city in the East Boston area, where it was thought of at that time to be a little bit more industrial and more fit for a substation. And so that's how we landed here at this site in Eagle Hill. And as far as throughout the city, we have substations throughout the city of Boston. Many of them you would never even know. I know Councilor Flynn is here on this call today. Just last summer, we opened up the new Harbor Walk expansion down at our substation in South Boston, which is very similar in topography to what will be here in East Boston. That substation is on the water over there on Boston Harbor. It has a harbor walk that the residents use very, very often. They walk their dogs. We just recently did some, I'll call them renovations over there, upgrading the property with some doggy dispenser bags, some new benches and things just to make it feel more welcoming for that community. Additionally, we have a substation in High Park that actually looks very much like a building. You would never know being in that area. It's across from a playground. And then one other that actually two. We have one down in Faneuil Hall that I'm sure if you're in Faneuil Hall, you walk by it every single time, you would not know it's there. And then one in West Roxbury, that has a baseball field on both sides of that substation. And so again, we have these in every single community, throughout the city, and it's where that load is and where it's necessary to power the community and ensure that we keep having reliable power for the residents of Boston, as well as all throughout the Commonwealth.
Thank you, Ms. Bowden. And Councilor Murphy, just for the questions, if we can keep them locked in on the actual ordinance in front of us today, that would be great. I don't know what your follow-up questions are, but I just want to make sure that we're focusing on the language of the ordinance and not any projects specifically within the city.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I think it's helpful to understand, the effects though, right? If the home rule petition is in play, then making sure like what would be affected. So my next question would be, can you describe any flood mitigation studies or subsequent measures that are put into place to protect environmental justice communities from potential negative impacts? Like, have you been doing some? Yeah. An understanding like what work has been happening.
Yeah, David, and I'll turn that over to David and Craig, who are our technical subject matter experts, to talk about the flood mitigation and things that we do in environmental justice communities to ensure that we're keeping communities safe.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Nicole. And thank you, Councilor Murphy. This is an issue that was very important to Eversource to make sure that its facilities were designed in a way that they would not be negatively affected by sea level rise that may occur over the next 50, 100 years. And it's been an area that the Energy Facility Siting Board has reviewed at great detail in its proceedings over the last 5 to 7 years. There's been a series of sea level rise estimates that have been reviewed and analyzed during that siting process. And in designing the company's what they call their design flood elevation, which is the elevation at which the facility would be graded and set, and at which the substation equipment would be located. The company took the most aggressive of those sea level rise studies and provided an additional margin of safety to ensure that its facilities, given the topography in the area, would be at an elevation above the highest estimates of sea level rise that any of those studies and analyses had estimated for what may occur over the next 50 to 100 years. So it's an important issue to Eversource to make sure its equipment is safe and will reliably operate for the benefit of its customers in the area, and that it will be resilient to sea level rise that may occur as a result of climate change and storms. And the facility has been specifically designed to be at an elevation that will avoid those types of effects going forward.
Yeah, and I guess I'll just add that when we add infrastructure capacity like substations, we look very closely at the impacts of the environment. You know, the substation is a critical part of the electric infrastructure that's needed to serve. So we make a lot of effort in terms of how they're engineered, the safety systems put in place, how they react to big weather events, storms, whether it's a hurricane nor'easter, and the way the substations are built are all with those types of environmental factors in mind, and they're built very safe. They have controls and safety measures that ensure that.
Thank you. I may have a few more questions as the conversation continues, but I think I'm good right now. Thank you for those answers.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. Thank you, Craig and David, and I saw a couple other folks jump up. Councilor Mejia.
Yes, I just quick follow up to Councilor Edwards' point about there not being an environmental expert on the zoning commission. I'm just curious, will the building commissioner be the only sole voice when it comes to determining that particular development if it violates environmental justice principles? And what happens if climate advocates and the building commissioner disagree? I'm just curious about kind of like how we're gonna handle that. And then I also think that the environmental justice principles definition in Chapter 8 of Acts of 2021 is pretty clear in what the mission is, but it's pretty broad in terms of what we're trying to defend against. So I'm just curious, where is the accountability for this, the building commissioner, and what metrics will be using to ensure that their approval/disapproval of the project truly reflects environmental justice? Those are the only questions that I have.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. And I'm gonna kick it over to the original sponsor and author, Councilor Edwards.
Thank you. And honestly, and so thank you so much. Those are excellent questions. So right now, I'm just following the current system that we have, where the building inspector is the lead enforcer for all of our standards for buildings. And this is just adding a different standard for which they can enforce, and they have broad enforcement powers, which is really a good thing. And it's something that many of us are used to. In terms of what and how those standards will be, that is what the zoning commission can help to write those regulations. So not only would we be defining EJ, and what they are in terms of where the utilities or will be cited, but they can also promulgate regulations specifically for the building inspector so that they are also defining what is an EJ violation. Again, I expect, and we could, if you feel more comfortable, Councilor Mejia, happy to put in the home rule petition that it would be guided by the people, or that there will be a certain committee that could be set up that is directly informing the Boston Zoning Commission to make sure that there are experts who are part of that conversation. And if it's okay, so I think there was do they have the sole enforcement powers? Yes, because that's what they have. They have the sole enforcement, or the top enforcement powers for all other standards that we have when it comes to buildings. And then in terms of expertise, how are we going to ensure that those standards are put in and drafted? They have 1 year to draft those regulations. We could absolutely make sure those regulations are including a committee or some sort of expert panel to push and move the Boston Zoning Commission to make sure those standards are clear, black and white, and can go further than Chapter 8, as you mentioned, which is pretty broad. If it's okay, Councilor Mejia, I'd like to turn it over to our experts in the room, Councilor in the other sense, Attorney Stacey Rubin, who might also be able to add in where there could be some enforcement mechanisms in this.
Yeah, and then I have a follow-up question. So yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. I'll get to you for the follow-up. Stacey Rubin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, Councilor Edwards, I agree. I do think one potential group to consult with could be this state EJ Advisory Council, also established by the roadmap law under the Acts of 2021, Chapter 8, Section 60, where it's also codified in state law. I think another way to handle this could just be to make sure that you are providing some sort of another public hearing to sort of bring that in. But otherwise, I think those two mechanisms, in addition to what Councilor Edwards says, would work.
So along with the Boston Zoning Code coming up with the regulations, also mentioning the Advisory Council as well?
Yeah, to consult with the Advisory Council.
Thank you. So two things I just would like to advocate for. Yes, Councilor Edwards, I would like to see something very explicit around community voice and engagement, because having gone through the process a few years ago, we saw that was not the case. So this is an opportunity for us to right that wrong and codify it into something that we know that community is going to be leading. And that at least they'll have some voice in what those decisions look like. So I'd like to see that. And then the other piece that, and I'm not sure kind of what this would look like, but, where I find in the 28 months that I've been in this role is that we often propose a lot of things, but where we get kind of lost is in the implementation and the accountability enforcement of it. So I would like to see some language about kind of like maybe whether it's quarterly or every twice a year, that there would be some level of mechanism and accountability so that we can just check imbalances to see how things are going. What are we learning? What do we need to modify? What the zoning basically, does the public really have the confidence in what we're proposing in the execution of it? So I'd like to see something that we're able to monitor on a regular basis, whether it be through a report or something that's transparent that we can just go onto some dashboard. But there needs to be some level of public transparency around the execution of this. So I'd like to see that.
Agreed. So maybe under the building inspector component that they would produce an annual report or something about how many citations or how many failures that they're finding of environmental injustice or environmental justice. Does that would that be meeting that goal?
Yeah, and also kind of it would the bad actors, right? I think that there needs to be some sort of transparency around the bad actors and I think the accountability piece is where we always get lost. So some enforcement and some language around that would be helpful. Whatever that looks like to you, Councilor Edwards.
Thank you. Yep.
That's all that I have, Councilor Arroyo. Thank you to the maker, and I'll keep listening in.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. And so we're now just going to go through the home rule petition so that if folks have any specific portion that they would like to see amended in some way or clarified in some way, they can. We'll start with the ordered section, that a petition to the general court accompanied by a bill for a special law relating to the city of Boston to be filed with an attested copy of this order be and hereby is approved under clause 1 of section 8 of article 2 as amended of the Articles of Amendment to the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, provided that the legislature may reasonably vary the form and substance of the required scope of the general public objectives of the petition. And so just my own question, that is the section where we've sort of given the legislature some say over fixing it, correct?
Correct.
Or editing it, rather.
Yeah.
Any questions by anybody on that section? Don't see any, so we're going to keep moving on. So section 1, the general court finds and declares that a serious state of emergency exists in the city of Boston regarding environmental injustice and climate change, whereby residents of the city suffer from air and water pollution and a lack of open space and tree canopy, and whereby environmental justice communities bear a disproportionate burden of industrial pollution, risk of extreme heat and flood, and displacement from natural and unnatural forces, and further finds that additional safeguards are needed to secure the environmental rights afforded to all residents pursuant to the Article XCV2 of the Massachusetts Constitution with regards to the siting and operation of siting and operation of energy and industrial projects. Any questions, any comments, anything anybody would want to change there? Going once, going twice. All right, section 2. Section 6 of Chapter 665 of the Acts of 1956, as amended, is hereby amended by striking out this section in its entirety and inserting in place thereof the following section. And this is it. The Boston Zoning Commission shall, within 1 calendar year of enactment of this section, promulgate zoning rules and regulations to govern the review of the filings, petitions, or proposals by public service corporations. So that's section 2. We're going to move on to section 3. Section 7 of Chapter 665 of the Acts of 1956. I see a question from Councilor Mejia. Councilor Mejia, is that a question for section 2?
Yeah. The one that you just read, can you break that down a little bit further so I can understand what that means in like the most simplest terms, please?
Yes, so I'm going to let Councilor Edwards break that down. Section 2, Councilor Edwards.
Section 2, 1 second, just pulling it up. Section 2. So, and this is one of those sections where having section 6, which I think was sent to all of our inboxes, would be helpful. This is amending language that's currently in section 6 that allows for the utility companies to simply forego our Boston zoning, our local zoning, and go directly to the DPU. If it might be helpful, I don't know if you can share your screen, Councilor Arroyo, and show section 6, or
let me try to do that now.
That might be very, very helpful so that we can do this side by side.
Does that come through?
Yes. So you'll see in section 6, oh, I got tiny. A building, structure, or land used or to be used by a public service corporation, which is essentially a utilities company, may be exempted from the operation of a zoning regulation or amendment. That's basically our local zoning code. If upon petition of the corporation, the State Department of Public Utilities shall, after public notice and hearing, decide that the present or proposed situation of the building, structure, or land in question is reasonably necessary for the convenience or welfare of the public. This essentially allows for natural gas, or National Grid, not to take Eversource out of this, because this is not about just Eversource. This allows for National Grid, which is a public service corporation, may simply be exempted from our building codes, from our zoning regulations, by petitioning the Department of Public Utilities. And the Department of Public Utilities, will decide after a public notice and a hearing whether this is essentially is necessary for the convenience and welfare of the public. The DPU, according to this, is going to determine what is best for the city of Boston, a state agency. And the proposed, I have to get out of this screen. The proposed amendment essentially takes out that language about public service corporation may be, and there is no may be exempted anymore. It's the Boston Commission shall, within 1 calendar year of enactment of this, promulgate zoning rules and regulations to govern the review of filings, petitions, or proposals by public service corporations, period.
Okay, thank you for that. But I do have a follow-up question.
Of course.
And I'm just going to keep going back to this whole idea of having, a building commissioner have the full discretion over these stop work orders. And I'm just concerned that unless, if they lack environmental justice experience, right, to your point, I would really like to see the commissioner guided by and overseen by experts and advocates who know this issue better than any of us. So is there any way within the context of that particular, in that language, that there is some community oversight or voice where?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So within section 2, what I'm suggesting to meet this this rightful and I think very good point is, instead of just saying the Boston Zoning Commission shall within 1 calendar year, how about the Boston Zoning Commission shall, with consultation of the Environmental Justice Advisory Council and if you want to say environmental advocate or advocacy organizations.
And community stakeholders, right? So I think that it's really clear that not everybody is an activist, right? There are folks who are deeply impacted. So community stakeholders, I would say advocates, organizations, and consult with environmental justice populations, perhaps, right? So that we are being inclusive of folks.
So absolutely. So the Boston Zoning Commission the Boston Zoning Commission, in concert with or in some sort of consultation with community stakeholders, organizations, the Environmental Justice Advisory Group, shall convene a process and within 1 calendar year of enactment of this section, promulgate zoning rules and regulations to govern the review of filings, petitions, or proposals by public service corporations.
Yeah, that feels good.
Okay.
Thank you. And if we could just make sure that that language change gets sent to my office, I'm assuming Councilman here, Councilor Edwards, whoever is willing to type up that sentence and just send it to us so that we can officialize it. Thank you, Councilor Edwards. Section 3. Section 7 of Chapter 665 of the Acts of 1956 as amended and is hereby amended by inserting at the conclusion of section 7 the following paragraph. Upon a determination that a use or a proposed use of a building, structure, or land in the city of Boston would impede the attainment of environmental rights afforded to residents of the Commonwealth pursuant to Articles XCV 2 of the Massachusetts Constitution, or frustrate the environmental justice principles as defined in Chapter 8 of the Act of 2021, the building commissioner of the city of Boston may issue a stop work order. The building commissioner shall indicate the purpose, rationale, conditions, and duration or permanency of such order, and provide instructions to public officers concerning the suspension or rescission of any permit, license, or authorization associated with such use or proposed use. Any questions as to section 3?
Councilor Arroyo, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
I have a different section 3.
All right, hold on. Let me just do a quick share screen and then figure out where the difference is. 1 second. So is it showing the document?
Yes.
All right, so section 3, I have it right here. Where's the?
I see the difference. There was a late file when I introduced this, and the late file included, for example, Chapter 91. There was some suggestions from Conservation Law Foundation. So it reads, there's actually another law that this is supposed to be part of. And I think it just, there's a little bit more Scrivener, just a little bit change. I mean, the goal is still the same, but there was some more laws that the building commissioner was able to enforce. So that's the difference.
So do we have Christine O'Donnell? Does she happen to have that amended version so we can get that out to all the counselors and we can just work off of that?
That's what we, I'm assuming so.
But basically what you're saying is that first sentence, are you saying the first sentence has additional information, or is it more so just what the building commissioner can do on the permanency of orders and so on and so forth?
I can read the version if you'd like, Councilor Arroyo.
That would be great, actually.
Okay. Upon a determination that a use or a proposed use of a building, structure, facility, or land in the city of Boston would impede the attainment of environmental rights afforded to residents of the Commonwealth pursuant to Article 97 of the Massachusetts Constitution, or prevent the implementation of the environmental justice principles as defined in Chapter 8 of the Acts of 2021, or prevent the preservation and protection of the rights in tidelands of the inhabitants of the Commonwealth as defined in Chapter 91 of the general laws, the building commissioner of the city of Boston may issue a stop work order. And then I think it's basically saying the building commissioner shall indicate the purpose, rationale, conditions, and duration or permanency of such order, and provide instruction to public officers concerning the suspension or rescission of any permit, license, or authorization associated with such use or proposed use.
So I think we can use it that way, and then we'll just, obviously there's an amended version of this walking around, so we'll just add that to the final. But does anybody have, I see Councilor Murphy. Councilor Murphy, the floor is yours.
Yeah, it may not be specific just to this, but I do have a clarification question. So under this petition, the commissioner can ask any active work to stop, is what I'm understanding. And in an event that a group, say like Boston Water and Sewer, is conducting any routine upgrades or responding to an emergency, and the commissioner or say an EJ, an environmental justice group, believes it goes against this petition, would they be able to be asked to temporarily or permanently stop that necessary work? So I'm thinking, like, how are we going to prevent any abuse that this petition to ensure the city isn't shut out of any necessary like infrastructure upgrades? Could there be?
We could, well, there's one immediate thing we could do is you could put in an emergency clause, right? Then, so if Boston Water and Sewer is doing an emergency work, you might want to say that the building commissioners are going to stop the repair or the concern of emergency. But I want to be very clear right now, in any work that anybody's doing in the city of Boston, if it causes other harm, let's say if and Boston Water and Sewer is going through and digging up monitoring holes or whatever, and it starts to shake my building, I will call up the building inspector right now and have it shut down.
Right, so, but now this would be a committee with a commissioner that could also,
So we do it anyways. My point is we have stop work orders as if we're showing a harm right away. Now I understand, Councilor Murphy, the concern of abuse of, I'll give a crazy example just to, but let's say a little factory has been going on for some time and then all of a sudden it's, in using diesel, it's been doing the same thing for years and years and years, and it's causing an environmental problem. And I just have hated it the entire time. And I just want to shut this factory down, right? And I call up the building commissioner and say, I just feel such and such, and shut it down, right? The arbitrariness of a shutdown, I can completely understand, Councilor Murphy, the concern of that. And so I think if done correct, the zoning commission, because this is a year after the fact, upon passing, they still have to come up with all the regulations and standards a year after the fact. So we can put in those regulations, nuisance and, certain warnings to prevent somebody from just hauling off and just getting rid of a competitor business, for example, or hurting somebody. So I think we could put in those emergency concerns in the regs. I don't know that they belong in the home rule, but we could definitely put that in the regs. And
To that vein also, what would the turnaround, do we need language specific to make sure that we have, what's the turnaround time for the building commissioner to indicate the purpose, rationale, conditions, or duration or permanency of the stop work order? Much of the work being done to improve the city's infrastructure with or without the city's residents, they're not going to benefit from this if we don't have some sort of language in there to protect that.
I completely agree. I think the timelines, the appeal process, all of that usually goes in the regs. And that allows for us to get deeper into the weeds, like the Concom sets a standard. We're still building those regs, for example, for how and when they would come in. So all of these questions are completely relevant to the implementation. If we have even the power one day to implement it, right? We still have to get this passed at the State House to even have this expanded power. But that's why I opened my comments, Councilor Murphy, saying I don't want this to be a NIMBY tool. I don't want people to just come in and say, I'm coughing all of a sudden because of the local business, and then all of a sudden they shut it down. I don't want that at all.
And one last thing, thinking about working together and all, what are the current steps all the utilities, including National Grid, which I know I don't see are here today, but Eversource, MWRA, Boston Water and Sewer are taking to include all of our environmental justice communities in the future plans? What are the current conversations and efforts to work with these communities is something I think we have to really think about.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think many of them have not been tasked. I mean, we just passed the law having environmental justice in our laws for the first time. So a lot of them haven't even adjusted their regulations to include those words and to include that standard. In many cases with the example in East Boston, there was a lot of retroactive adjustment to include language interpretation, to redo hearings and conversations in East Boston that we felt the community had said, and Voice with Eversource, that they felt that they were excluded from. But, that's at their election. And what we want is the direction from the community in the actual zoning code saying, this is how you will converse with us, how you will work with us, and how we will have standards to hold you accountable, which is why we want to put in our zoning code. I'm very excited about this because I think it's actually for the first time regulating how the public utility companies will work with the city of Boston, guided by the city of Boston, which I think is so exciting.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards. Councilor Murphy, does that answer all your questions?
Yeah, definitely for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. Councilor Mejia, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. And I also just want to thank Eversource for being here. It's great to have you here in community with us and workshopping these, point by point here. So thank you for your active participation. It does mean a lot to those who are tuning in to see you here. I do have a quick question in regards to the work stop order. And I'm just curious from a preventative standpoint, should there be something in this that looks at so that we don't have to get to the work stop order, that there's ways that we can make sure before a project is approved that it's gone through this process so that we're looking at this from a prevention, not an intervention standpoint. I'm just curious about the thought around that.
Yes, Councilor Mejia. I believe the process we currently have would just include this new standard for environmental justice, but most building inspectors can't come in and just stop a work order. They usually come in, they have to investigate it. They usually talk with the owner, and unless there's an immediate ongoing emergency, like a building shaking, a fire, something like, where there's always a process before you go and shut something down, that they can appeal. That that it's transparent, that they put the notice up on the door, all of that is currently what they do currently. So we would just simply be adding in the EJ standards for the same notice, transparent conversation that they have before they could shut down a building. So that, again, like Councilor Murphy said, and as you just mentioned, you just don't want people going gangbusters saying, shut it down, shut it down, shut it down, shut it down, with no rhyme or reason.
Yeah, and would all of these notices be translated in multiple languages? Is that written into because one thing is to put some public notices out, but is there going to be language and information justice is what I call it, so all of these notices will be translated in multiple languages and everybody in the immediate area will be notified in a language that is relevant to that particular neighborhood? Is that part of, is that already baked into this, or is that something that yep, I see you shaking your head.
Because that's what of your work, Councilor Mejia, making sure that when the city, when the language access ordinance comes to fruition and we finally start to push out everything, it will have to be according, by your work. And thank you for that. Basically saying we're not going to be working as though this is an English only speaking city, right? And that's what got us in trouble with the Eversource situation. Is some people really felt that they were not. It really hurt the trust because so much of that process was English only.
Yep. And is that in terms of the responsibility? Who would that fall on?
I think. I can't remember. Was it we set up the office?
I'm just curious if there will be any accountability for the utility company to also lean into that work in terms of helping to support it. Because I just do think that, we are a small city. Our resources are pretty limited, and there should be some sort of level of accountability on the utility company to be able to, have some sense of responsibility on making sure that is multilingual. And it's not just translation. I also want to uplift the fact that I always talk about this, that there are native speakers who don't know how to read and write even in their own native language. And so that we need to expand that conversation to the use of audio and visuals that will help get that message out.
Correct.
In multiple spaces. So I'm curious about what that looks like.
So it would most likely be taken care of in the regulations, and in the regulations we would cite to the language ordinance that you passed saying, violation of the language ordinance and notice by the companies would be maybe grounds for, a warning or indication that they are not environmentally just. Again, the city of Boston, if it's like with the building inspector though, which is what we're talking about, the city, they have to comply with they will have to comply with the language access ordinance at the city of Boston. So it would be more holding the city of Boston accountable for its notices. And then I agree with you 100%. There could be baked in a warning signal or system for when the city of Boston puts it on the DP, or excuse me, on the public utilities corporations to put out multilingual or to put out notices that must be multilingual.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful because accountability needs to be 360, and it's all of us working together to ensure that we're holding all of ourselves accountable to this. So I think that the utility company should get some sort of warning, and then there should be some way for us to monitor that as well in terms of execution. Like, did they do it? Because one thing is to ask them to do it, and then the other question is whether or not they have done it successfully. So there needs to be some sort of accountability tracker baked into this somehow.
I think the question for me is, or more appropriate, I think that kind of accountability tracker and that kind of level would be more suited for the regulations, and not so much what we need the State House to pass.
Yeah, well, I agree. I just think that wherever it lands, it needs to go somewhere and live somewhere, and we need to be accountable to it.
100%.
I follow up to your question, Councilor Mejia. Just to clarify, if someone was then to call the building commissioner and say there's something that needs to be investigated based on the environmental justice complaint, we're going to have multilingual folks in that office and following up with that person on what's happening in their language. And that's going to be something that we absolutely make sure is happening. If I'm listening correctly to what you're saying, Julia, that need that we know is there. So I'm just following up on Councilor Mejia's question there. Is that something you would put in the language, Councilor Edwards, to make sure that when this
the language of the regulations and enforcement would absolutely cite to the current standards for language access, and everything that flows under that, including I think within each department there's supposed to be someone who is monitoring and doing an accounting of all the notices and making sure that there are more than one language, that there's a certain level of access to people who speak different languages in each department. So that flows from a law that we passed last year.
So I know it's like already, so for using what the city is based now, but I know from many times Council Mejia talks about that isn't happening, right? And many people, like you said, in this case in East Boston, many residents who did not speak English felt like they weren't even aware of what was happening. So wondering if this is something specific to the commission and this home rule petition that we're talking about now, that we would make sure that in this case. So it would, I guess, look different than what we have right now in the city to ensure that there is more language acquisition and language equity there to ensure any complaints or follow-up.
Correct, because all of the departments are going to go through an overhaul for language accessibility. This will be no different.
Council, and then I just have one more, one more for, and then I'll be done. I swear, for this section. Two things. One is, it's in plain language, right, and simple. I think that sometimes, we have good intentions and things literally do get lost in translation. So I think that we need to be super mindful of making the language as easily accessible as possible. And then the other part, and I'm not sure if this is already a consideration or we're going to talk about it at some point, but there needs to be, if there's a project, there needs to be signage or some sort of kind of like announcement that this particular project has gone through the environmental justice review and it's all, all set, or because I think a visual indicator could help. So Councilor Edwards, I'm not sure where you might potentially kind of write this into your petition, but that there needs to be some sort of signage on a work site that says that this project has gone through a review, has been approved or whatever the case is. And then when a work order ensues, and then there needs to be a second, signage that says on hold or something that is a visual indicator. Is that something that you would, I'm not even sure that's something that already happens, but if it doesn't, then I think it's worth considering some signage on a work site that this project is environmentally just and has been approved by whoever approves this. And then if it gets stopped for whatever reason, then there needs to be something not too obnoxious, but some sort of like a big X or something that says, put on pause, put on hold for violating the environmental justice, principles, or something that needs to be visually, publicly noticed on the actual work site. Is that something that we could consider including, or is that extra?
I think so. I'll hop in there and then I'll give it over to Councilor Edwards. I think that would be something separate and apart from this, which is just really creating the language to allow us to have oversight on those things. I think the signage is sort of a separate aspect to the city, but I'll let Councilor Edwards answer that.
Yes, I think that's a great way of kind of helping to go. This is so big. This is so grand. This is so at 30,000 foot view. We don't even have the permission to do this right now, and that's what we're trying to get is out of the city of Boston and then the whole state house to even incorporate this as a standard. Then how those standards are implemented in what languages, by whom, but with what deadlines, all of that will have to come in the regulations, which is kind of like what we just did, with linkage and other ones. We don't have the permission. So I'm agreeing with everything you and Councilor Murphy are saying. But it's literally, we're just talking about something we don't have the right to do quite yet. And that's what we're trying to create right now is the right to even have this conversation with the zoning commission, with community in more than one language, and really define in the most innovative, creative way, environmental justice and standards that we could lead the state, if not the nation, on in our zoning code. But we don't have permission to do that yet.
All right, so I get it. We got to first get it passed, then we can work on what the implementation is going to look like. Yeah. All right, so I just wanted for the record to let it be known that I definitely, once it gets passed, because I'm speaking it into existence, y'all, is that we need to then make sure that the implementation process has some sort of process in place to ensure that we have all of our ducks lined up to ensure that we're communicating effectively to the folks who are going to be impacted by whatever said project is being considered in that area. So thank you. I will yield the rest of whatever time I don't have left. Thank you.
Thank you. And section 4 is just the section on severability, which is standard. We've done this a number of different, I feel like almost every ordinance that ever makes it out of this committee has the severance, which basically is the provisions. If there's a provision of this ordinance, the provisions of this ordinance are severable if in any provision or portion thereof should be held to be unconstitutional or otherwise invalid by any court or competent jurisdiction. Such unconstitutionality or invalidity shall not affect the remaining provisions, which remain in full force and effect. So basically, Section 3, Section 2, Section 1, they're all separate and apart from each other. And so that concludes it. I don't know if Councilor Edwards, you'd like to do any closing statements. I see you have one finger up.
Yes, for more than one statement, but I would like to, I would actually would like to throw it over to Eversource. Did you have any suggestions on language, any concerns about some of the language? Do you think that this is something that's practical? I mean, and by the way, we invited Eversource because we didn't want to have a conversation about this without them. They're part of this conversation. They're part of our infrastructure. They're part of our utility future. Okay, so this is not about being against anybody. This is about really I believe zoning in a green future, and Eversource is going to be part of that. We also invited National Grid, and I also want to thank Boston Water and Sewer for coming. So we did invite the major utilities to come and be part of this conversation to craft this legislation. This was not an exclusive conversation. This is not against anything. This is literally trying to make sure we have codified the best working relationship. So didn't know if Eversource had any thoughts about the way this working relationship would work. Are you in opposition? Are you in, what concerns? And it would be great to hear if there's a practical concern that we're not hearing or thinking about. You can only help inform the conversation.
Floor is yours. Floor is yours, Nicole. You're fine.
I invite Craig Holstrom and David and Aaron Engstrom to join me here on the screen. I will defer to my technical folks who are doing this work out in the field, but from a community perspective, I just want to continue working with the folks here in the community, having conversations. I see Mr. Walkie, him and I have been having conversations for quite some time, and so I'll defer to Craig Holstrom and David Rosenzweig to speak from a technical perspective.
Thank you. You're muted, Craig.
You would think I'd get used to that by now. Obviously I'm not a lawyer, and I know there's a lot involved with making changes like this. And, certainly, we really need to be careful of unintended consequences. I know during the hearing, we talked about kind of the whole NIMBY, issue. And that I am concerned about that. But today was a good meeting for us. It provided us ability to listen and learn about the provisions. I will say, at Eversource, we fully support the city and the state, for that matter's transition to clean energy, and that will be through electrification. It's important we get this right. It's important we work together as we move forward and we think about EV and heat pumps and probably technology that hasn't even been invented yet. It's going to require capacity. It's going to require electric capacity. And we need to make sure that we do work together and we do it with everybody's interest in mind, especially in communities that, are the most vulnerable. So, I do appreciate the invitation, and we will continue to work with this group and others to do the right things for the city and for the state. So I do thank you for allowing us to be here today.
Are there any thoughts about the language, though? I mean, beyond the practical concerns, and like I mentioned before, a lot of those practicalities will be discussed when the regulations start to happen.
Yeah, like I say, there's a lot here. I'm not a lawyer. I mean,
yeah, we can defer to David. David, any comments on the language?
I think it's really the philosophical approach that the proposed home rule petition is directed at. It's a major shift from placing the expertise and trust in the state agencies, the DPU and the Energy Facility Siting Board, who have been created by the legislature to, oversee these issues for the benefit of all citizens and all communities. And they have very expert staffs and engineers and economists that have, 10 or 20 years of understanding of these energy and environmental issues and balancing those issues. And this would be a shift in that paradigm. And without getting down to particular words, that's a major issue for the city to think about, for the legislature to think about, obviously for Eversource to think about. And I'm sure we'll have more conversations on it as we go forward.
Would you be comfortable in that shift if utility companies were working to help with the Boston Zoning Commission and community stakeholders are part of that conversation to come up with the zoning?
It's been my experience in having done many of these projects with the building commissioner and the Boston Zoning Board that we're always interested in working with them and understanding their concerns and making sure that we address anything that they have, any input that they have, and to make sure that what we do is consistent with their thinking and that we're not acting in opposition to their views as to what's in the public interest.
I mean, I'm really, if you do have language suggestions or concerns, I really would love to have that conversation and conversation over and over as much as possible here. So it's totally transparent that there isn't something, people would feel is underhanded or coming around or will meet us at the State House, in the dark. It would be great to have that only because I think this is hopefully an example of how we will be working together. And it could be setting the example for how utilities and community can work and setting regulations that we can all live with. Again, what I would be disappointing is if this passes out of City Hall and then we are met with such opposition and concerns at the State House that could have been talked about now.
Understood.
Thank you. And so I think that basically concludes it. I'm going to allow Councilor Edwards, if you have a closing statement as the original sponsor.
I'm excited about this. I think this is a part of what the council has done in the last 4 or 5 years. We've done seismic shifts and then also allowed for regulations and community input. We've done a seismic shift where we changed the charter, and we're coming up with a community process for what it means to be participatory. We've done a seismic shift in our zoning code and putting in civil rights legislation for the first time in zoning with the affirmatively furthering fair housing, and then allowing again for the regulations and the back and forth to come up with ways in which we are dealing with the displacement crisis and exclusive communities. And we came up with all of that. And so I just want people to understand we do big things in this body. We do big things and we trust community. And so what we are hoping is that this is another big thing, a seismic shift, as you said, David, that actually leads us to a greener, transparent future where there aren't enemies in the conversation about how we're going to create a sustainable living for our city. Instead, we are all coming together with our expertise and natural concerns. So this, I hope, is, this is the goal of a working session, is just air it out. What are the concerns? There's no enemy here. We do believe in process, and I do believe we have demonstrated that we can set our communities up to define that process and to still move our city forward. So thank you very much for coming again to Eversource. Really do deeply appreciate that. And I hope, National Grid and other utility companies might have some statements and language suggestions. I want to thank also the advocates, the attorneys, the folks of East Boston, of course, and my colleagues.
Thank you. And so with that, we'll get the edits back in terms of the small edits that I think were made to Section 2. There were some edits already in the substituted version for Section 3 that I didn't hear any issues with. So just once we see that, and I believe that's all of the language changes that I saw there. And so I look forward to passing this. We'll be in communication and getting this done for certain. And so with that, I'm going to adjourn. Thank you, everybody, for your time and for the focus that you put on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.